Many people take care of their final arrangements decades before their death, so their families aren't left with added stress on top of their grief.
But Nate Morabito had a community watchdog investigation. He revealed some who bought services from a Blunteville cemetery are not getting what they paid for. Nate?
You know, if there's not a resolution soon, there's the potential for many more people to be impacted. The cemetery in question is one many of us pass all the time. It's right across from Tri-Cities Airport. It changed names and owners in recent months, and both sides are refusing to honor past customer contracts. That's resulting in added heartache during what is already the most difficult time of people's lives. Barbara Skaggs knows burying her mother was never going to be easy. But it was also never supposed to be this difficult.
Let us pray.
12 days after her mom's death,
give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses.
Today is the first time she's truly able to grieve.
For thine is the kingdom and the power.
This is her. She was 81 when she passed.
Skaggs will never forget the look on her mother's face when she died on February 18th in this house.
I knew that she felt comfort in this because in her mind, everything was going to be taken care of.
She says this woman, Mary Russell, took care of all of her final arrangements decades ago, something she was proud of, an effort to make sure her kids were not left with a burden.
I'm just so glad that she passed on without realizing what was actually happening now, because she would be so worried, so upset.
Despite all that, her daughter sat here last week more stressed out than ever.
If she had known what was going on now, she would be devastated.
In the midst of her grief,
I just,
she scrambled to do exactly what her mom took steps to avoid.
She paid out like she was supposed to, and then she had to turn around and be dishonored like this. It's not fair to her.
Skaggs says her mom bought a plot at what was formerly Tri-Cities Memory Gardens, as well as a pre-need burial contract here. But much to her disappointment, this will not be her mother's final resting place. The cemetery officially changed owners and names in the last couple of months after financial troubles, bankruptcy, and ultimately foreclosure. The new owners are refusing to honor pre-existing contracts. Contracts like the one June Morell's family signed late last year. Months after her burial,
I know she would be terribly disappointed.
The nearly $2,000 grave marker and vase they bought are still missing.
Instead of grieving, it seems like you spend more time mad about this situation than actually being sad over her death.
We really feel for these families.
Eugene Allison is one of the new owners. He and his partner bought the cemetery at a foreclosure sale. Allison argues he didn't buy the company, just the land.
The existing contracts stayed with Tri-Cities Memory Gardens, Inc.
He also says he doesn't have control of the trust that holds the money from all of the pre-need contracts. And even if he did, he's convinced there's not enough money there to cover the needs of the thousands of people who previously bought services here. Allison says the family that previously owned the cemetery for the last 4 decades is to blame, and he's directing grieving pre-existing customers to them.
Jeff Gasperson and his company, Tri-Cities Memory Gardens, needs to come up here and perform the services and provide the merchandise that it contracted to provide years ago.
Have I done it exactly perfect? No, sir.
Jeff Gasperson is the first to admit he's at fault for the cemetery's financial troubles that led to the foreclosure.
We've worked our ass off to take care of families.
But sitting at the other cemetery his family owns in Church Hill, he says the Blunteville Cemetery, along with any of its contracts and problems, are now in the hands of the new owners.
I left everything exactly where I was supposed to leave it.
Records reveal the state of Tennessee previously called into question Gasperson's management of the cemetery. A 2014 audit found 15 problems, some of them repeat issues, including his failure to make proper trust deposits on time for dozens of customers.
I'm disputing the audit.
A lawsuit recently filed by the North Carolina Cemetery Commission also raised concerns about trust mismanagement at a Gasperson cemetery in Buncombe County, something he says his family is in the process of resolving. Regardless, he insists there is plenty of money in the Merchandise and Services Trust to cover all of his former customers.
A couple of $100,000 in the trust.
He says the new company needs to find a way to use that money.
They have a responsibility to administer the trust.
Well, that's not true. None of that is true.
Both sides are adamant their hands are tied, and both say there's nothing they can do to help pre-existing customers.
If I had the money to help them, I'd help them.
Is there anything you all can do?
Not without funding.
Allison cites the same law Gasperson showed us to conclude that man, not him, is responsible for handling the previous contracts.
These families can show who they paid for this service.
The dishonor that has been shown to her, she didn't deserve it.
To take out of this world the soul of our deceased sister.
At the moment, Barbara Skaggs could care less who's to blame. All she knows is someone disrespected her mother.
Everything that she didn't want done happened.
Thank you, Jesus, for holding her hand just like you hold ours.
Now she's not burying her mom next to Mary's husband, as originally planned.
She has to be buried somewhere else.
Instead, she's burying her in Virginia. 12 days later,
I'm taking what she left me to bury her.
and she's using the $5,000 her mom left behind to give her a proper goodbye.
Ashes to ashes, dust to dust.
I just want to gain her respect.
Now for the rest of you, if you bought a plot, that plot is still yours, but the merchandise and services, those are what appear to be at risk. Gasperson says customers bought insurance with their funeral packages, and those packages should be transferable to any other funeral home. And Kylie, after we got involved, the two sides pledged to try and work together to come up with some kind of short-term solution.
And I understand that the state is now involved. I mean, this is a powerful story.
Yeah, the Tennessee Department of Commerce and Insurance is involved. The spokesperson told me the agency is, quote, evaluating the best way to address the issues, end quote. I plan on following up with the state first thing tomorrow morning. We're going to stay on top of this.
All right, thanks so much, Nate.
Attorneys for the state of Tennessee say it's now up to the new owners of a Blunttville cemetery to make things right for people who previously bought burial contracts there.
Just 24 hours after this heartbroken daughter said goodbye to her mother, Barbara Skaggs almost seems like a different person.
Amen.
Amen.
Instead of crying, she's smiling.
I love it. I think that is so great.
She's talking about this letter. The Tennessee Department of Commerce and Insurance sent it to the new owners of this cemetery today, the cemetery where her mom was supposed to be buried, the place that refused to honor her mom's contract.
They say God uses the bad things that happen in your life and he turns it into good.
Today she takes great joy knowing her mother's story is making a difference.
I feel like it's honoring her in a special way.
East Tennessee Funeral Home has the trust, or has the trust to use.
While the
existing contracts stayed with Tri-Cities Memory Gardens, Inc.
and current owners deferred responsibility to each other, people like Jed Connerly's grandmother suffered. But today,
It seems like we're getting somewhere after several weeks of going back and forth.
Connerly feels like the state's action could finally force the cemetery to place the vase and grave marker they bought at his grandmother's grave.
We would like to have closure on this thing. It's, we paid for all this.
That's my mother.
Another group of people are seeking a different kind of closure.
She was just a sweetheart.
People like Bonnie Gray's family.
And it hurts me most for my dad, who is having such a difficult time anyway.
This wasn't supposed to be the 84-year-old's final resting place.
They bought their plots in 1974.
Instead, Susan Arney says her parents bought plots at Tri-Cities Memory Gardens more than 40 years ago, on Valentine's Day of all days. Because of the ongoing dispute here, the family had to buy new plots somewhere else last month.
Her and my father were married for 65 years.
That way, when Bonnie's husband dies, the pair won't be separated.
All I want is for them to reimburse my father at full market value.
Now, Sarah, as great as this sounds, this may drag on some more. The new owners intend to dispute the state's position sent in that letter today.
Blunttville Cemetery's new owners now are pledging to help the grieving families who were hassled by an ongoing dispute there.
Alan Bittinger buried his mother in February.
This month she would have been 92.
The change of ownership at this cemetery made the timing of her death even worse.
What can one say about a mom? She always took care of me. Up until the last few years, I've been taking care of her.
Today, this son is still trying to take care of his mom.
My dad was a Methodist minister, and she was a full-time Methodist minister's wife.
In reality, those parents took steps to avoid their kids' recent troubles.
These are the contracts that my father had signed.
Decades ago, the Biddingers bought pre-need contracts at Tri-Cities Memory Gardens. But when Vivian Biddinger died on February 16th, the new owners of the cemetery wouldn't honor that pre-existing contract.
They wouldn't even bury her. We had to pay more money. It wasn't right.
Not only did they charge this family again for something they already paid for,
And they charged you again?
Yes. They charged us $2,500.
they charged them significantly more.
When I came here, I ended up having to pay for the opening and closing and extra because it was on a Saturday.
And how did that make you feel?
Cheated.
Now, when he thinks back to the days after his mom's death, that is what he remembers.
It was bad enough that my brother and I had lost our mother, and then for this to happen was it was devastating.
The cemetery's new owners bought Tri-Cities Memory Gardens at a foreclosure sale and have maintained all along they are not responsible for the financial troubles of the past owner, Jeff Gasperson, a man they say should have to honor all previous contracts.
Even though Jeff Gasperson is not willing to take responsibility for that, we are. And we will honor all outstanding contracts.
Today, as we talked with Biddinger, the cemetery manager approached us and committed to moving past all of this.
So we're willing to take that responsibility of someone else's debts and someone else's irresponsibility to move on.
Not only that, the manager told us once the new owners take control of what they believe is an underfunded merchandise and services trust, people like Biddinger and others will get refunds.
Like I said, once I pull the contract, review it, and able to access that money, you will receive some money back.
Are you going to be able to make things right for all of these people?
Yes.
All of them?
Yes.
That's 100% your commitment.
It took some time and arm twisting to get to this point.
I would have felt the same way.
But the manager says he understands where customers are coming from.
And I hope they realize who's the bigger person.
Biddinger had his doubts.
I think if he does what he's saying, I will be happy. I'm concerned, though, that he won't.
Fast forward almost 3 months later,
He called me and told me he had a check for me.
Biddinger recently received a pleasant surprise. The manager called him up and made good on his promise.
The one thing he did say is that he said he would do it, and he said, I'm doing it.
In the end, this grieving son received a more than $2,100 refund for his mother's burial, money his mother never wanted him to spend in the first place.
I'm just glad we still have people in this world who will keep their word.
It's never easy visiting his grandmother's grave, but today, for the first time since June Morell's death back in November,
It's a huge relief.
Jed Connerly doesn't feel quite as empty.
To finally see it, it really means a lot.
He's talking about his grandmother's grave marker. In the days after Morell's death, her family paid almost $2,000 for it. But through winter, spring, and summer, her grave sat unmarked.
It was kind of hard to see with nothing here, and I know she wouldn't like that.
And her grave wasn't the only one. Dozens of other contracts went unfulfilled too. And for a short time, neither the former manager nor new owners would take responsibility.
Things happen for a reason, and that's okay. It was a little speed bump that we had to overcome.
It took some arm twisting by us and the state, but eventually the new owners came around, committing to make things right for all of the families who bought pre-need contracts under the previous owner.
We did take on the responsibility of the cemetery, which included some debt. And in turn, we have fulfilled and are fulfilling those promises.
East Tennessee Cemetery estimates the previous owner failed to fulfill contracts for 160 grave markers, vases, scrolls, plaques, and dates of death. He says the cemetery has already installed roughly 40 of those and hopes the rest will be in place by the end of the year.
If we give you our word, then we will fulfill it.
June Morell's case is proof.
Even though it took 11 months, I know she would be thrilled with it.
Back in March, Connerly had his doubts this day would come. But for the last several months, he says the cemeteries remain committed.
This is something I know she would have wanted just as soon as she was buried. This would have meant a lot to her.
So today begins a new season. It's long overdue, but that doesn't seem to matter anymore.
Having this here, we finally have closure.